And so you have this person who's supposed to be professionally dedicated to history, which, historians we study history so that we can understand where we came from, so that we can, make hopefully better decisions about what we want to do now. And so someone who studies history obviously has a valuing of the past. And yet this same person is deciding to cut himself off from his history, right? For half the day, he's going to be at work with no sense of who he is. So there's an irony there that like someone can professionally be dedicated to history, but then on a personal level, totally neglect it. And so that's an example of severing right there, like even just that disconnect.
Hello and welcome to the Stoner Story Witch podcast. My name is Kristen. I am grateful to be producing this podcast on the lands of the Chorotega people. Thank you for joining me today. My guest today is John Klinger, and he is a friend of mine that has been a part of what has become a mixed race cohort group, but from an embodied social justice course that we had taken about 2.5 years ago through Rev Angel Kyoto Williams, who I reference at the end of every episode. And I'm really, really grateful to have yet another person in my world that I can have a conversation with about severance. Again, I think a big goal of this podcast is just normalizing having conversations with people just in our sphere about what are stories that matter to you, matter to me. Can we make the space to just have a really emergent conversation and make space for, the thoughts, connections, feelings, embodiment that comes up. So you can check out the timestamps in the show notes to just kind of get an idea of where this conversation is headed. As always, this episode contains spoilers. Specifically, the spoilers today are regarding Season 1 of Severance, which aired in 2022 on Apple. Season 2 is coming out in January of 2025. So yeah, I invite you to take a pause if you're sensitive to spoilers, because they will be coming at you left and right. Well, welcome to the Stoner Story Witch. I want to ask you, first and foremost, what identities do you lead with, John Klingler?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's John Klingler. I'm a cis white male descendant of colonizers here on Shawnee Miami land, which is colonially known as Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm a teacher, high school teacher, pursuing a somatic coaching certification. So yeah, that's what seems relevant right now for me. I'll leave it there.
Okay, awesome. And why are you here today? What made you say yes to the invitation to come on my podcast today?
Well, in addition to just knowing you and knowing that that'll be a juicy conversation. Yeah, Severance is just I can be picky about shows. I have kind of like there's a lot of shows I'll watch an episode or two and I'm like, this isn't it. Severance though has just been really stimulating for me. It feels like it does such a good job of reflecting a kind of moment that we're in historically. Obviously, the show takes place in a kind of different time, but there's just so many parallels and allegories to our life today, and it's just done so beautifully and artistically and convincingly.
Yeah,
I'm big on shows needing to be convincing. It has to like match with my understanding of humanity and human tendencies, or else I get thrown off. So yeah, okay. So I'm here because it's a great show and I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah,
dissect it.
Yeah, and I think I'll just offer a little bit of context of like how it is that we know each other too, because I think maybe that's important. That we met in a white-bodied cohort with Embodied Social Justice, which is a program, like a 3-month-long program or whatever of just leaning into the question of how do we embody social justice. And we were part of a cohort, and we've been meeting ever since. So for like the last 2.5 years, something like that, we've been meeting with a group of like, yeah, 8 of us total. Yeah, I feel like I just want to say that I really do trust you, like as like you said, like a cis white settler colonizer man, like holding more power than me in all these ways, that it's like we have had lots of conversations, and
Mm.
like you are not afraid to go the grappling way.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
we've cried together, we've celebrated together. Like it's
Mm.
even though I've never met you in real life, and
Yeah.
and then I just said, hey, I'm going to do this season on Severance. If anybody's, I was like, I just want to have more conversations. To me, there's power in just in having like an intentional conversation with someone around a story, and like what parts of me do I project into that story. Um, you didn't mention this as one of your identities, but I know like you also do a lot of like dream analysis
Mm.
is a
Mhm.
big part of like the work that you do with or like classes you've taught and things. And so like the archetypally richness and like how you would interpret something versus how I would interpret it is going to offer us some glimpse into like something juicy. And
Mhm.
so
Right.
thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule in a busy month, right before the break of school. Um, okay, so we've chatted a little bit about where we might be going with this conversation, and one thing that I know I was really intrigued by that you kind of mentioned is, yeah, your identity as a history teacher. And as we know from Severance, Mark, the main character that we follow, before he was severed and working on the severed floor at Lumon Industries, he was a history professor.
Right.
And there's actually this scene, and I totally have forgotten to mention it because it's just this absurd scene of the no dinner party
Right.
where I mean, it's just like when we think about attachment, like the building blocks of attachment being contact nutrition, which is like kind
Mhm.
eyes, vocal prosody, and eating and drinking. And it's like, it's
Mhm.
literally, we're going to pretend like we're connecting and like nourishing our body. We're going to pretend like we are not human bodies with human bodily
Right.
needs
Yes.
and pretend like that's sufficient. Like it's fucking absurd. But in the midst of that, there's this like pretend, like this just like pretense of intellectual elitism where they're like, did you know that in World War I they didn't call it World War I, like in those times they called it the Great War. And and Mark just says like his response is like, well, yeah, like, because they didn't know there was going to be another one, of course they wouldn't. And
Right.
it was like that was just like the most intelligent thing. It makes me curious if there isn't like um, you know, maybe like a targeted approach on a history professor of World War I specifically, and why it might
Mhm.
be helpful for Lumon Industries to sever that person. But
Mm.
anyway,
Mm.
all that to say, you are a history teacher, and you even were making connections before I even like we didn't want to have all our conversations before we pressed record today, but you were even like drawing parallels between Severance and World War I specifically, and considering that they were literally having the conversation about World War I, I was like, all right, there's obviously some thread there to pull. So I'm curious, like, yeah, what comes up there for you? Like, just what are your reflections on just as a history teacher? Like, what's it like kind of following Mark S?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it was intentional that they chose Mark to be a history professor. That's an interesting point of whether Lumen had targeted Mark, but I for sure think that the creators of the show were intentional about him being a history professor. Um, and for me, yeah, I mean, we could go a variety of ways, but for me, it represents how easily we all sever in certain ways. The whole show kind of parallels all the different ways that we sever. And so you have this person who's supposed to be professionally dedicated to history, which, historians we study history so that we can understand where we came from, so that we can, make hopefully better decisions about what we want to do now. Um, and so someone who studies history obviously has a valuing of the past. And yet this same person is deciding to cut himself off from his history, right? For half the day, he's going to
Mm.
be at work with no sense of who he is. So it's there's an irony there that like someone can professionally be dedicated to history, but then on a personal level, totally neglect it. And so that's an example of severing right there, like even just that
Mm.
disconnect. And there's other ways in which throughout the show that we see him wanting to disconnect from a past that is too painful. For example, when he's out on the date and the subject of his soon to be born niece, is it?
Hmm.
Yeah, soon to be born niece comes up and they were gonna name her Gemma, the name of his wife who we think has died. And he's like, no, I don't want her to have she's not choosing to have big feely baggage attached to her name. Like I don't want
Hmm.
to burden her with big feely baggage. So it's like a history teacher saying, I don't want family history in my family's name because it's too
Mm.
painful. Um, so yeah, and we see those parallels throughout the show of like a painful history. It seems to be that seems to be the reason that a lot of these Lumen workers are choosing to be severed is to kind of escape something painful, whether
Mm.
going on in their life. So yeah, and I don't know, I could draw connections to like how we as a society, especially as white folks, sever from our history, how we are led to do that through white supremacy. But I don't know if we want to go there right now.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for definitely naming that. In general, right now in the United States,
Right.
there is a fucking debate about
Yeah.
teaching accurate history because it
Right.
might, literally because of that pain, or a lot of the argument has been like, well, it's just going to make the white kids feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, um, maybe there's a question here of like, okay, like as a white man teaching history, and like it is a painful place to be. It's like very much, and I think this is like, you know, like the severance that we see in Helly, this you know, like this complicity in the overwhelming oppression of others, and then like when you finally have, and we as, you know, I'll speak for myself, but like as a white bodied person, like I can definitely like point to moments of my awakening of like, oh wow, I've been complicit in the oppression of others, and it's through actually seeing like the ways that I've been oppressed, or there's ways that we come to finding our solidarity, or as Rickon would say, camaraderie. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just being in a camera with someone, but it's actually standing together in hard times, recognizing a common struggle and reaching out to offer them a loving hand.
Mm-hmm.
And like the way that we're teaching history to be like, oh, it makes us uncomfortable. So
Right.
let's not learn to get comfortable experiencing discomfort. Let's not gain uh you know, an ability to cry together and mourn together and experience futility together and then be like, okay, and now fucking what next? I think what's also coming to me is like that edge walking that we see Ragabi do. Ragabi's that the black
Mm-hmm.
woman that she put in the implants, but then she's doing the reintegration. We do not know much of her story aside from that
Right.
one scene
Right.
that she is in. Um, and I'm just really putting a peg in the fact that she's like a black woman and is like kind of this like in this role of like, you know, like an oracle or something. Like it makes you think of the
Mm-hmm.
Matrix, and she's also a black woman, and that always just felt so perfect. Um, but yeah, but like, you know, what edge has she walked by like literally being in charge of doing the implants, and then now she's in this reintegration, or she's in this reintegration program. So like, yeah, how do we balance when like I burned out as a high school teacher, science teacher, but like I couldn't reckon like all I was learning about like indigenous traditions and how those were not in the standards. And I just was like, I'm literally perpetuating white supremacy and colonization, and I don't know how not to. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. I don't know if I even have a question or if I just want to be like, wow, John, this really sucks. Maybe we should cry about it sometime again. I don't know. But anyway, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I mean, My school is a little bit different. We have a little bit of a buffer from, I mean, our state does have some of these laws that are about basically whitewashing history. But since I teach in a majority Black district, there's a little bit of a buffer. We have like an anti-racism policy. And so I personally don't feel any real pressure to, um, to teach a whitewashed version of history. So that's good. Um, as the country as a whole, though, yeah, I think exactly. Like it's we're being trained to continue to forget, to continue to numb, which, as Resma has pointed out, for the first time for me, that's when I first kind of saw it through this framework of white colonizers having come because they were or having committed the atrocities they committed because they are coming from a very traumatized state in Europe, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
things, the sort of poor and working class people that ended up on the shores of what we now call North America were ones
Mm-hmm.
that had dealt with extreme trauma, very hierarchical political system, torture being common, very punitive kinds of things. Not to mention just like famines and crop failures and all that stuff. So then not having healed that pain, right? Not having healed that pain is what leads to the perpetuation of the pain, right? He talks about
Mm-hmm.
clean pain, dirty pain. Dirty pain is the pain that we don't actually take the time to heal. And so what ends up happening is we enact it outwardly. And that's the history of our country in a sense. There still is this refusal to address that. Um so yeah, as a whole, our country definitely is trying to not feel the pain of history,
Mm-hmm.
just like Mark is trying to not feel the pain of the history of his life. And then you see parallels, yeah, and then the way Lumen kind of enforces this positivity um, through like it's like the religion of white supremacy, which of
Mm-hmm.
course is tied into capitalism and patriarchy and all the things, but there's kind of this religion of like we got to be positive all the time. We always
Mm-hmm.
got to be moving forward. And you see that in Lumen, right? With like these fake smiles and like
Yeah.
lemon part or what is it? Melon parties. Like,
Melons.
what could be more boring than a melon party? But like that's supposed to make people happy, right? Or like a 5 minute music session.
Oh
These
my
like
God.
tiny little things, these like, yeah, all these like non-substantive gimmicks to make people stay positive and not ask
Yeah.
questions.
And still so much arbitrary rules even within that. Like you can pick
Yes,
one instrument. There's a tray
right,
of instruments. Why couldn't you play multiple instruments? Why not
right.
just like there's no actual like there's every like joy, you have to experience every fact with equal pleasure. It's just like, everything is just so, even the joy is very much like you can only have this much of it. Um,
Exactly, yeah.
oh, there was something else that you said. Yeah, like the weaponized kind eyes, and it's really funny
Mm,
because like that's like what Carmen Spaniola talks about when she talks about contact nutrition. But literally, the scene when Milchek is like, "Mark, do you know how to make your eyes kind?" I was just like, "Oh my
mm,
God!" Like it's literally like he knows like how we build mammalian attachment, and he is just absolutely weaponizing it for
wow.
disorganized attachment, which I talk about in a previous episode. But I'm just like, and then I just
Yeah.
think about like even as a teacher like when like I still like just the times that I was Milchek that I was like
Mm,
trying to be really kind,
hmm
but I'm ultimately still being like, you know, you have these individual benchmarks that you need to achieve. You need to perform better. You're like there was always some coercive end that I was like tasked with because it was my job. At least that's what
mm,
it I don't know. And I don't
yeah.
know if I can reconcile if I can reconcile that, maybe I'll find my way back in a classroom. But yeah, it
Yeah.
well, and then it's interesting too. Then we see um, we weren't planning on talking about Ms. Cobell, but um, we see that she like just her education when we see it that she was like in like this Egan school. I guess I don't remember what, but it just seemed very much like this religious upbringing. She has
Mm,
her like Kier chosen one Kier
mm,
like just this
hmm
um and and it's Paulo Freire that says like, yeah, when education is not liberatory, the goal is to become the oppressor. And so
Right.
like, just like what are the little ways that I can be in like a power over position, but like redistribute that and like make it, like to where are all the opportunities in my life that I can disrupt what is expected of me in any sort of like role that I may be an oppressor. I feel for what it is to be like reaching towards liberation when we're like kind of still needing to operate and feed our families and work in systems that are not always
Right.
maybe like what we would have chosen.
Yeah, I mean, you drew the comparison when we were chatting of the break room in Lumen
Oh, yeah.
being similar to the sort of in school suspension, right? So you have this really punitive policy in Lumen where they get sent to the break room, and I see the double entendre there. It's the break room,
Uh-huh.
but really it's like the break your will room. Like that's what I see the room as. It's like literally designed to break your will. You have to repeat this phrase over and over again until until you literally believe it. They're lie detect, they're testing with lie detectors. So you're literally having your will broken so that you believe something else and that you take the blame, the individual blame. I solely am responsible, or, or whatever it was. And yeah, and I think that does parallel in school suspension in that like, yeah, you're separated and you're supposed to repent and reflect. You'd say it that and in school suspension in and of itself kind of parallels prison in a sense, like go to this room where you're isolated and reflect and repent. Um, so yeah, that's there. And I think in general, the parallel I see between Lumen and schools is that, yeah, schools, I mean, in a certain way, that is what they're designed for, right? They're,
Right.
they're designed, like kids are thought of as like these creatures that need to be molded
Right.
in a way that they're gonna then fit into society, right?
Right.
And I don't want to like look at it totally black and white and say that like that's all malicious. Obviously, kids need to learn things like
Mm-hmm.
for our entire human history, like adults teach kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not 100% malicious, but the way schools do it, and they like sit in your seat and raise your hand, and if you don't, and
Mm-hmm.
all the other rules, and if you
Mm-hmm.
don't, you're gonna have a consequence, and if you get an answer wrong, even that is like seen as sort of bad. And so some kids
Mm-hmm.
learn not to raise their hands, and your will is literally being, in a sense, I mean, at least if you go against it at all,
Mm-hmm.
anyone who has a sort of more a personality that's more of a challenger, they either get their will broken
Yeah.
or end up out of school.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some parallels there, like the entire project of school being to turn people into a certain type of
Mm-hmm.
um, professional person that's going to work well in our capitalist system.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I have one thought on the break room, and then I want to go back to exactly what you're saying here because I
Yeah.
another thought I had on the break room too is like it's almost if you think of like a severance or like maybe like going down, like I also just kind of think of like a conscious and subconscious, and I think we'll get to this a little
Mm.
bit when we talk about Irv, but like what little I know about hypnotherapy, which is probably more than most people, just through anyway, is that like the goal of some of these like hypnotherapy tracks or like going into trance is to like make suggestions to your subconscious, and that your subconscious can in those like trance states can be more open to like
Right.
new habits or things that you might in your conscious brain be resistant to. And so I just think that on like a subconscious level to be partnering torture in a context that's
Mm.
being defined as a break. So like
Mm.
if to just associate like, oh, I don't want to take a break. I would rather work than take a break. Like I also think that like how does capitalism keep us
Yeah.
from like feeling like, oh, it's not safe. It is not safe for me to rest. It is not safe
Mm.
for me to take a break. And it's like we see just like a very literal brainwashing of it. But then if we're like, oh, that's a symbol of a very large problem. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, we just keep people tired. We keep them working, and then they're not gonna have have the time to, or the capacity or whatever. I mean, yeah, whatever capacity of whatever it is, to be able to do anything
Mhm.
about it. I really liked a comment you made too, because this is something that I've just, oh my God, because I think so much about Helly. Um, but when we were talking about, like teaching compliance, and that Lumen is very much like a public school, we would say in that way. It's like, why can we say that probably Dylan, Mark, and Irv are products of the public school system, and that Helly probably went to a private school, probably like didn't have, like has a lot of what we would say, and like Resma Menachem that you kind of referenced earlier. And my grandmother's hands was roughly kind of what you were referencing, like
Mhm.
this, like the embodied uh, entitlement in some ways of white people that certainly is related to trauma
Right.
historically, but that like Hollywood, even on a subconscious basis, have almost like an embodied anti-capitalist like elitism of like, I'm not doing that, like maybe
Mhm.
never needing to work a day in her life. Like, you mean to tell me I need to sit at this computer and do, like, this is fucking bullshit, because it is fucking bullshit. But
Mhm.
like the like public school has just already done such a good job that it's like Lumen didn't have to try
Right.
too hard, because everybody's coming down that elevator with more embodied submission
Yes.
than Helly.
Right.
And um I just fucking love that so,
Mhm.
so much.
Yeah.
Um yeah, and that we see that too. We see that too with like, yeah, the kids that can have that extra privilege of extra, like extra summer camps, or extracurricular programs, or in some cases even like private schools, like giving them like more sense of agency.
Right.
um
Exactly.
yeah.
I uh I remember a study that stood out to me when I was getting my teaching degree, where researchers looked at different schools along sort of the class spectrum. I think they looked at five different schools, but I remember that the working class school, the most working class, the poorest school, the implicit curriculum, like the most important thing for the kids that they're being taught is obedience.
Yeah.
Like very clearly, it's follow the directions.
Hmm.
And you know, the three in the middle were kind of had their own variations, but at the very top, it was, these very elite private schools. It was all about developing autonomy and developing the ability to make decisions, make good decisions, and use critical thinking, and just like a lot more freedom of movement. And so they're literally being taught to be, more free, because they're the
Hmm.
ones that um, are going to have the more opportunity to be the executives, right? And
Yeah.
be the ones on the top with the autonomy. So yeah, Helly then presumably would have gone to a school like that. And she comes in with all this embodied resistance. Like she's like, what? You're gonna like, she knows, like, no.
Right.
But the rest of us, we've just been so conditioned to it. Most of us are like Mark and company, where it's like, yeah, this is just it, This
Hmm.
is just it. We're not really able to see outside of the box, at least for a certain portion of our life. We're not able to see that like things could be different,
Right.
um, until something radicalizes us, right? And
Right.
then that actually does happen for them. But Helly comes in with the embodied resistance. She's like, hell no, I'm not doing this shit.
Right.
I'll kill myself. Like I'll literally kill myself. So yeah, and of course, Lumen has the most trouble with her, and it's a huge, scandal because of what we find out at the end. But yeah,
Right. Right. Well, and it's interesting. Okay, so they have that in that big PR project when we see that, like, oh no, holy shit, she's Helena Egan,
yeah, right.
and she's big time in like the propaganda and helping the senators, and like that there's just like larger systemic like shit that's probably going to hit the fan in season 2. But
Hmm.
um and we see that there's this tagline like united in severance, and it's just like, oh my
Hmm.
god, like that's terrible, that's absolutely like, ah, like, are you kidding me? But then it's like, okay, but wait a second, like Helly like actually did experience some solidarity, some camaraderie, some like she it's like it's we're supposed to laugh at this like like we're going to take a picture and this is your family picture and work is just like a family, and again that's like totally like coercive tactics to just like
Right.
make you feel like you have this in group and you don't want anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Fascism light, but then we see when she's talking with her dad, when the Innie Helly is talking with Jamie again in the bathroom, like he comes, like first off, he's not well attuned enough to his daughter to even like Ms. Cobell is more attuned to her than even her own dad. Like Ms. Cobell can just
Mm-hmm.
like see really quickly, like, oh my gosh, it's you. But like
Mm-hmm.
her own like the absolute attachment wound, like the lack of secure attachment that she would have to have with her dad to even want to sever herself in the first place is like is just devastating, and I believe is very much emblematic of like just the hurt that it is to be so disconnected from your own humanity when you have that level of wealth and power in such an unequal and harm-filled world, that it's like it's she's probably her whole life been grasping for, you know, connection and attachment with her with her father, with her parents. I mean, I don't know, we don't know about her mom, but like, and on the severed floor, like she got clarity. She was like she couldn't even remember the color of her mom's eyes or whether she even had a mom. She only answered one question correct and it was a perfect score. Like,
Right.
and that actually like enabled her to unite to that outy part of her that is like it's all been bullshit. Like her whole life has probably bullshit, but it took like actually being like, oh my gosh, other people see this as bullshit too, or I'm seeing I don't know. That's my hope is that this is just like a really radicalizing moment for Helly,
Mm-hmm.
because that's like a story I really want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
She has also, I love the moment, and it's after she's with her dad in the bathroom, and she reads or she has it memorized, the break room compunction statement, where
Mm-hmm.
it's forgive me for the harm I have caused this world. None may atone for my actions but me, and only in me shall their stain live on. I am thankful to have been caught, my fall cut short by those with wizened hands. All I can be is sorry, and that is all I am. And I was just like, when I see her looking in the mirror, like she's just like, I feel like in that moment is that moment of like the white fragility, the white guilt, the, you know, the wealth wound, whatever you want to call it, where it's just like the oppressed oppressor or whatever it is, where it's just like, I have been awakened and there's this invitation to sit in shame, but she has learned in the fucking break room, trying to break her, but like, it's actually just like, I have been complicit. My fall has been cut short by those with wizened hands. So it's like, if I just think like, who are the wizened hands in my life? Like, I have Resma Menachem, I have Rev Angel, I have like, there are people who can like help guide the pathway of my liberation and tell me when I'm causing harm. All I can be is sorry. And that is all I am. I'm sorry. I'm not ashamed. I'm not going to wallow in self pity. I am sorry that there's like a sadness. Maybe I think of like sorry would probably be sorrow. So it's like, okay, sad is good.
Mm-hmm.
And then she fucking goes in there and then she, you know, tells everybody, did Lumon accidentally give her a radical idea of a radical embodied practice in like that little mantra that was meant to
Mm-hmm.
break her? And it's like she's just
Interesting.
fucking like flipping the script on all of this. Is like
Interesting.
that's what I hope it to be. I want it so bad. I yearn for it so bad.
Yeah. And I guess we'll have to see because at the same time, we know that Helly's outie through the video that she sent in is very much like, no, you're not a person. I make the decisions. So yeah, it's like how can any Helly break through to outie Helly? And so that gets us into
Right.
like, that there's parallels with unconscious stuff and yeah, how do we get parts of ourselves communicating, right? If we have an oppressor part of ourselves, so to speak, or sort of like
Right.
control conscious part of ourself that is blind to another part that's more unconscious, but that is needed for wholeness and for liberation. Like, how do we get those in conversation?
Right.
So I'm
Like,
curious what the show will do with that.
yeah, yeah. Like recognizing there's a part of me that has been complicit in the oppression of another part of me.
Yes.
But yeah, like, and I know we've talked a little bit about like IFS and internal family systems and I mean, Rev even talks about, I think it's like the collective process or the liberatory path. It's like one of her pillars of liberation. This idea of like, go get yourself, go get your people, go like, who are what in hospicing modernity they to say like, who are all the people on your bus? Like, just who are all those?
Hmm.
I think that's another reason I just love talking about stories because like I can be like, okay, I really relate to Helly in these ways, but I also really relate to Irv or Dylan or
Hmm.
Mark or whatever. And so it's like, in what ways can stories actually be a little place for us to just be like, ooh, what part of me really feels solidarity with this character? And what is the feeling? Like, what is the emotion? And
Oh yeah, I feel like that goes right into a lot of stuff I noticed with Irv. Irv, at first, and he's kind of the last one to be radicalized of the four. But he's the stereotypical, he's the believer. He's the true believer. He
yep.
believes in Lumen. He's trying to make everyone, he's like very sanctimonious and like trying to make sure everyone is like doing the proper things and paying the proper respects to Lumen and to the Egan family. He was very passionate when they visited the perpetuity wing in honoring the forefathers, so to speak, the prophets, kind of in certain terms of religious language. It's very religious.
Mm-hmm.
He reminds me of someone who's just very religious, but not really, a sort of in a box religion where it's like following the exact rules, following the letters, not much
Mm-hmm.
about the actual inner experience. Anyway, even when he's arguing with Dylan at one point in the background, I don't know if you noticed this, but they're arguing. I think Dylan's joking about being like a bodybuilder on the outside or something, and they're bickering, arguing, and Herb at one point says, "That's why my posture is ramrod straight." And like I feel like that's like very reflective of him. Exactly. He's very rigid, back straight. Um, but then there's this other thing going on, right? Which is, and this is where it kind of connects with what we were talking about with like parts of ourselves and conscious, unconscious, and dream work. Um, is like you can anytime we have a person like that that's trying to act like everything's positive, right? Never wants to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge the negative of anything. Never wants to like entertain challenges or criticisms. There's something that's being repressed, right? There's something that's being pushed down into the unconscious, and it's there though, and it's
Mm-hmm.
you can't avoid it. And Irv can't avoid it. For me, that like my take on it is that's the black ooze coming out. Is like it's his unconscious trying to wake him up. Like, yo, dude, this
Mm-hmm.
lily white picture that you have of the shit going on here.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, there's this like impending doom message that you need to be hearing. So the black tar, the black ooze is like trying to wake him up to like actually things aren't as um, great here as they seem.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I see that as and then we find out later that his Audi is like painting these very black images too, right? So with dream work, like Jung has this term called compensation, where if we're out of balance, if on the outside we're living a life that is, like or very positive, sanctimonious, follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
There's another part of us that's being repressed that is the opposite of that, and that there needs to be a compensation happens in dreams or visions. In his case, it's kind of more visions,
Mm-hmm.
but something that's trying to even the scales a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing I thought was really interesting with Irv is we is when we see him go into the closet and get out that chest because Irv comes to in his own home. Maybe that's why. Um, but I feel like I have a theory that Irv had like a contingency plan for what might happen if his innie ever does
Hmm.
make it on the outside, because he just like he's sitting there, he's painting, he sees. It's like, if my innie comes to, I want them to see, I want them to be in a room of these black elevators.
Mm.
And I want them to hear the Ace of Spades by Motorhead playing.
Mm.
And he just kind of like, he just walks over to the closet, he gets out a chest, and he just happens to look in his pocket, and there's like a key. And we see that, I think in the chest there's it might have been his dad, but there's like
Mhm.
army or
Right.
marine or some armed forces.
Right.
I don't remember if Irv was maybe also like had received something, but I
Mm.
think too there's something like, the radicalization that happens, um, like when a soldier is kind of just like, wait, what the fuck is this war that I'm in? Like, who am I really answering to? Like, it
Mm.
makes me wonder if there wasn't some younger, older part of him um, that even on the outside was very like into the dogma of maybe like the military and like the lies that the military tells you. And then
Mm.
there was some radicalizing event, and it's like that
Mm.
his innie is on that same path, but just like the timing is different because, and that what he's trying to do is, I mean, I also feel like the drinking of the coffee, the listening to the loud music, the angry painting is like he's trying to induce his innie to sleep. Like he like recognizing that there, um like that that like that's his best way of um I guess reintegrating, for lack of a, or like just having, any sort of integration is kind of like is connecting that. And then I also think that it's like an embodied practice. Like it's like people who wake up and meditate, or for me, like I'm baking, or, like just what are what are like just the practices that we do in our everyday that just kind of like, I think when I fucking forgot to ask you the question, but like what resources us for collective liberation, or what is connecting me to my most intuitive self. It's like, I think a lot of times that's creativity. I think a lot of times it's like something that gets us into a flow state, or a, you know, some either some people might say that it's really in their body, some people might say it's really out of their body. I don't know, but
Mm.
I kind of I'm like, maybe that's my question, is like, is Irv's painting trying to connect to his innie, maybe connect to his, like just go get himself, that liberatory practice of go getting his parts.
Mm.
Maybe he's connecting to his wildness, but maybe it's also the thing that's resourcing him for liberation. He knows that his Audi is going to die the moment his innie goes in that black elevator. And that's another common thread, is like this death phobia in Irv,
Mm.
that
Yeah.
like
Mm.
Irv wants to remember and be remembered, and to think that Burt would retire and not remember him, but
Mm.
he'll remember Burt. Like that is like, that's the fucking thing that radicalizes, is like, I want to be
Right.
remembered. I don't like, I'm gonna die. Well, like once everybody on this floor retires, then my life will have not mattered. But we
Mm.
see that like the lyrics of the Ace of Spades are all about like, it's like, I don't like, I'm not afraid of dying. And so it's just
Mm.
like, he seems very sure about his plan. I don't know what his plan is, but like he is he is reaching towards some collective future um that is, yeah, a big contrast to like the tone that we see in his innie. um
Mm. Yeah.
oh god.
It makes me think about the history question again, with, Irv wanting to be remembered, and that's what radicalizes him. It's like, wait, Bert's leaving, and now I'm forgotten.
Right.
And so, actually, as we're talking, and when he's on his Audi, we see has the memorabilia of, I think I remember it being his dad,
Yeah, I think so.
that had the military uniform. So again, there's some history there, and so I'm realizing as we're talking, like the innies are on this. The Audis go to be the Audis decide to sever in an effort to not face something that's
Mm-hmm.
painful in their life. So something about their past. So in a sense, especially Mark, you know, can't face his past or can't face this thing that's happened. And so now he's becoming an innie. But then what's ironic is that the innies are trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to
Right.
rediscover the history. All of them are like, wait, Dylan, I have a son. Like, wait, tell me more. I need to know more. And Irv finds the military uniform, and it's like, and it's kind of like I feel like that's the quest we're all on in a sense. Is like,
Mm-hmm.
who am I? What is this life I'm living? And I know there's something that could be richer.
Mm-hmm.
Where is my history that I've been cut off from? Especially here in North America. I speak for myself as a white person. A lot of us lost our culture once people landed in North America and decided to assimilate into whiteness. It's like, yeah, that's safer, that's easier. You can get some privilege. You can get your
Yep.
melon parties and finger traps and waffle
Uh-huh.
parties where you're all alone. You can have your waffle party all alone. But in exchange, you got to forget your culture,
Mm-hmm.
forget your language. Don't remember anything about the mother country or your people there.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are a few generations later, and we're living in this capitalist consumerist kind of hellscape that doesn't have any culture other than like, we're around Christmas time here. So it's like other than Santa
Or what we
Claus.
appropriate from other like more intact
Yes. And
cultures.
of course, there's the hunger for some kind of culture. And so white folks often end up appropriating, yeah, other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But yeah, so I'm just seeing this parallel. Like the innies are looking for culture and who they are. There's no real culture in Lumen, just like there's no real culture in the typical sort of white suburban um, upper or middle class or upper middle class white picket fence
Yeah.
lifestyle. Hot dogs on the 4th of July is about as cultural as it gets for us.
Yeah, right. Like all the out or like Mark as an Audi is like, oh, I wonder like what I do down there. But it's not like, oh, I wonder like who I really am. But yeah, like the innies have more
Mhm.
are answering more of that like existential, who am I? Which actually I'm really glad that you brought that up because that fucking wellness session that we see with
Mm,
Mrs. Casey and
right.
Irv. And like this wellness session is I am going to tell you about your Audi. It's like,
Yeah.
and you're gonna like these facts, but and then like there's all the rules, like you can't enjoy them too much, or else you're gonna lose point, like,
Yeah.
and all these things that are just
Yeah.
like absolutely terrible that I talk about in a my episode with Carmen. Um, but I think about that with because I know you and I've connected a bit on like Enneagram and astrology, and we don't need to vamp like too much here because it wasn't like one of the things we've talked about before now, but it was a thought I had this morning where it's like you know the impulse to do any like any of those like little personality tests, whether, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, getting your natal chart read, like human design. And it's like ultimately this like who am I? What's my
Mhm.
purpose? Like it's that those the existential question of the innie or like why am I like how am I here?
Mhm.
Who am I outside of what my conditioning within these oppressive systems of domination or whatever, but like the difference of like kind of being told who you are versus kind of like the flexibility of like you know a Leo rising can be like this, but then also with other placements, it's like it's kind of like it gives you like a little roadmap, but still ultimately you can kind of decide like what are like ooh, those shadow sides do kind of fit, or like these like areas of growth feel meaningful or whatever, that it's like I guess the difference in like giving away your agency to somebody who's going to tell you who you are versus like allow you to choose that for yourself. And
Mhm.
maybe what's coming to me right now, I guess, is just like the little bit that we've because we've done some you've in our relationship in our group you've done like dream analysis, and the one thing that I remember from like when we've kind of held space to dream share, I'm probably
Mhm.
butchering this, so please tell me more,
No,
but
you're
that
good.
there's like I'm not going to tell you your dream.
Right.
The language is if I had your dream,
Right. The
and so it's
projection.
yes, there it is. Yeah, like it's which is so funny because again, like um my impulse to the word projection is like, oh, we don't want that, because like the mental
Mm.
health professionals would be like, you're not supposed to project onto your, but it's like, well, actually, all I can do
Yes.
is have an embodied reaction to who you are, and allow yourself to just be projected onto me, or mirroring you, or witnessing you back to you, and like take it or leave it. But so yeah, like I'm not going to tell you, but this is what comes up for me, or I have a
Yeah.
question about this. And um yeah, I think I've said a lot. I'm going to let you say some words because I don't know that I have a question. So I think maybe I trust what you're going to say.
I know we don't want to talk too much about the wellness session, but one thing that struck me about that is it seemed like it reflected very much an emphasis on cognitive behavioral therapy, like the type.
Mm,
It's like, and I don't want to diss that. Obviously, that has its uses for sure. But there's a way in which what she was doing in there is like, we're going to train your thoughts to change. We're going to change your thoughts, which
mm,
doesn't acknowledge what might be the underlying cause of the thoughts, right? So
right.
what's happening subconsciously, what's happening in your social location and like or your social context, right? What's the social context that's
Mm-hmm.
leading to this need for a wellness session? It's all individualized and like, hey, we're just going to
Mm-hmm.
make you think better thoughts by telling you facts, telling you very vague facts about your outie that again are never specific because they don't want them to know anything about their outies because
Right.
again, starting to know that history is what makes people realize, want to know more and realize that the life they're living is not good enough. So anyway, yeah, it just reflected a kind of modern focus, hyper focus on CBT as the method
Mm,
uh, towards wellness,
yeah.
which again can be helpful, but there's other things that need to be examined sometimes.
So, I mean, I'll take a couple moments. Do you want to like what you're learning in like your somatics? Because I'm a big believer of somatics as well. And this was something I know Carmen and I talked about it in episode 3. If not cognitive behavioral therapy, then what's the other option? Or another option? Because of course there's binary thinking, more than two options. But like,
Right, right.
if you were like, what would be like a couple invitations you would give Irv if you were
Irv, yeah.
actually, and like this is, you are not an employee for Lumon, you are like, you're seeing Audi Irv or Innie Irv or whatever, but like the
Mhm.
idea of like, okay, like, you know, connecting to, like your social context or your soma or whatever, like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one alternative is dream work, and that helps us, you know, get in touch with subconscious stuff. But the somatic piece is another alternative. And what I would say to Irv is kind of an easy example, is I would maybe try to build some awareness around this ramrod straight posture.
oh
So,
yeah.
so the idea of somatics is that it comes from the Greek word soma, which is body, but like the person in their wholeness, a
Mm,
person, not just their thoughts,
mm,
not just their sort of outward personality, the neck up, as we in the Western world are trained to think of people. But like the body is part of us. And
mm-hmm.
all of us, as we live our lives, we start to take on a shape, like a literal physical shape based on the experiences that we've had. So, like, what's causing Irv to be so straight backed? What is it that makes him feel like he has to be so straight and rigid? I could speculate, we have no idea, but could it be the military father that had a really harsh, strict, anal way of being that made him realize, like, oh, I better be a
Mm,
good boy, I better be well behaved, I better be on point, in order to be safe, and
mm,
also in order to, um, have belonging with my father and
mm,
my family. And so like we literally take on a shape, and when we become aware of that shape, and when we start to work with that shape, we might be able to start opening some of those contractions, right, that have
mm,
led us to, and I should say this, that shape that we've all taken on is not necessarily bad. It has helped us survive. It has
right,
protected us in a certain way. And also, it inevitably is going to get in the way
right,
of what we want now in our adult lives. What are we
right,
working towards, and how are these tendencies that we've been conditioned to take on, these shapes we've taken on, how are they getting in the way? And
Right.
in becoming aware of the shapes and doing practices around them and noticing, sensations in the body and doing exercises to like let some opening happen, we can kind of
Mm,
let some of those contractions loosen up a bit.
mm,
And then choice follows awareness, right? When we're aware and open, we have more choice as to how we want to be in the world. And then we can start choosing to live a
mm,
life that's more aligned to our values. So yeah, I guess for Herb, it's like, yeah, what's causing you to be so straight backed? And is it cutting you off from other possibilities?
hmm.
Is it keeping you from doing things that maybe you want to do, like connecting with Burt,
Right.
and
I
again,
mean, like
that's
the
like,
play on words on straight, and he is
mm,
experiencing romance. Like he's like, I am ramrod
oh,
straight.
that's
And then it's
yeah,
like,
great point.
actually, like,
Great
and
point.
the big, and you brought to my attention just how pivotal. Sorry, I want to hear what you, but if you want to segue into like Bert's role in radicalizing him,
Mm,
in offering him that like you don't need to be so straight in all the sense of
mm,
that word, or like
yeah.
you can soften. Um, so maybe we can.
Yeah, good point. Like even in the relationship itself, yeah, it's an invitation for Bert to soften. And yeah, once he softens, it can allow for more connection. And then yeah, the other thing about Bert is like he gets he introduces a new way of seeing the religion of Lumen.
Hmm.
Irv. Like Irv again, he's a literalist. He's reading everything word for word. And Bert, there's some line where Irv does that, and Bert's like, well, I'm more of a first edition kind of guy. Um, and we don't know exactly what that means, but my interpretation was like I'm more a follower of like the initial impetus of this religion. Like if we think about it can make a parallel to Christianity. I'm more of a
Fuck
follower,
yes, let's
like
do it.
yeah, I'm more of a follower of the initial sort of embodiment of Jesus and the teachings there. I'm not really about all this external stuff that gets codified into what we now know as Christianity 300 years later.
Right.
And then his follow up to that is yeah, um, Kier, who's the analogy of God, Kier speaks to us not, or he's the parallel of God, I should say. Kier speaks to us not just through words, but also not just through words and paintings. And now I'm forgetting exactly what it is, but
Or just like in other ways. Like we can
yeah,
be
in other
open
ways.
to Cure communicating with us in
Yeah,
other
Kier talks to us in
ways.
ways outside just the handbook and paintings. In other words, like look around, like creation. Um, look at look at
Hmm.
nature. Look at creation for learnings and
Right.
for teachings. And yeah, so yeah, that's a good point. That is another way that's kind of shaping Herb's radicalization.
Yeah, and then I now I'm just having a curiosity of like when he says that when in relation to hearing that does Irv stumble across the orange book of
Hmm.
Rickens, the UUR.
Yeah,
Um,
good question.
which what an enticing title for a book for the innies who just want to figure out the answers. Like, who is the you I am? Like the you you
Right,
are.
right, right. I'm
Um,
pretty sure that happened. I'm pretty sure the conversation with Bert happens
after
after
that,
the book is found, at least. I don't remember if
yeah, okay.
he knows that Mark's been reading it, but I'm pretty sure it's after the book's been found.
But yeah, I mean, I love that invitation. 'Cause first off, it's just like I had not picked up on Bert being a little bit more um like a more, let's say, radical believer of cure. Like if I think of
Mhm.
myself as like I've been wondering if what it would take for me to like reclaim a prior, previous evangelical Christian, and I've severed myself from like what that was. But like through reading, I'm rereading The Madonna Secret by Sophie Strand, which is a novel about the romance between
Mm,
Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, or
mm,
like the historical Jesus,
mhm,
and um just being like, yeah, like the character of Yeshua in that book anyway is very much like the kingdom of God is like
mhm,
in an intimate moment with his
mhm,
beloved in the woods. Like it
mm,
isn't on the Sabbath. It isn't in the temple. It is like, it is right here. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, yes, like that. So when the idea of you being like, oh, the way I interpret Burt saying that is this, like, I'm a first edition. I'm like, who was Jesus in his context and who would be Jesus in our context? And, and
Yeah.
there's just like so much juiciness there. And so the idea of I'm a first edition kind of guy. And then also the like, um, you can actually experience, we would say like in the contact nutrition terms that like you can experience awe, you can experience connection, you can experience the divine,
Right.
like absolutely, like just in
In every
nature,
moment.
in community, in, and of course, you know, the innies never get to go outside and are very
Yes.
much like not allowed to be with.
Yes.
um but then I think, you know, like why does Lumen give paintings? Like, and this was a question that, because I've been in my previous episode, I was talking about like creativity as a human need or like or just like a creative outlet. And I just think like, yeah, there's definitely, you know, like propaganda there, but that there is, even in the propaganda of these paintings, there is still like the invitation to
Mm,
experience like an embodied awe that can radicalize you, that can
mm,
soften you from your rimrod straightness.
yeah. I love
And
that.
yeah, and that like, yeah, I just, I love the idea that there is, that like that revolution and resistance is like imminent.
Mm.
And yeah.
Because there's that line where either Irv or Burt, one of them, when they're looking at a painting with Kier, like looking over a landscape, when one of them says like, this picture's always made me uncomfortable. It almost feels like he's unsafe there. So I never knew, I didn't have an interpretation of that, but I think you're speaking to it somehow. It's like maybe the artistic quality of it makes them uncomfortable because they're used to something just like, safe, right? I don't
They,
know.
they have walls. They always have a wall within like 10 feet of them. And so like the idea of like that vastness, like
Mm,
feels
mm.
scary, maybe like
Yeah,
that
the
amount of
idea of
space.
freedom. Freedom,
Yeah.
maybe. That's great. Yeah, I love that.
Oh, and yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, thanks for all I can think of is like the when Helly finally like gets her quota and then like Kier flies away and he's like,
Yes.
I love you, Helly R or whatever. Oh my God. So
Another question that's popping up just real quick is the show makes us believe, leads the viewer to believe like you know, Lumen is a bad company
uh,
and therefore the Egans are like bad. But this conversation about first edition stuff makes me wonder if something has gotten adulterated along the way. Like who was Kier Egan? Maybe there's
sure.
something that'll come out about that. I hadn't thought of that until this conversation.
Right, that maybe he actually was like a super radical,
Yeah,
like,
prophetic.
yeah. I mean, probably, right? Is like all like the big change makers then just get,
Yeah, right.
I mean, like we like with like even like on Martin Luther King
Exactly.
Jr.
I was
They like,
thinking
it's like
that
we're gonna
too.
just like extract all these quotes to then like make people feel it, but it's like, no, actually, like, can we like, this was not even that long ago. Can we like put this in
Yeah,
some context, please?
right, right, right.
And really be
Exactly.
like, no, who was he and what was he about and what would he be talking about
Hmm.
today? And it's
Hmm.
the same stuff. We could talk a little bit about Dylan.
Okay.
Because yeah, I think it's interesting when we think about like Dylan represents the need that we have of like, I don't know, like recognition, need for being like maybe like a
Mm,
very young part, very like rewards driven,
yes.
extrinsic motivation. And
Hmm.
then so like what I'm thinking of is, you know, when after Helly tries to kill herself, we see that Dylan is like, we should like somebody should give her some finger traps. I would give her some of mine, but it was my idea, so somebody else can like give her some, which also is just like I like them too much to actually do it, but it was my idea. But like I know that it would cheer me up. So like like how we always try to cheer up somebody with like what works for us, right? And then and Irv is like, we should put up some of our favorite handbook quotes because like because maybe meaning, right? And then it ultimately was like, let's go to the perpetuity wing. Like we need to connect with like our meaning. um
Mhm. Right.
but like Dylan is not super motivated by the meaning. He makes the little bingo card, it's a joke to him.
Right.
We do know that the waffle parties were like, and that, man, there's probably some like dream symbolism we could go into there.
No,
uh
maybe.
with like why all like who are all the masks. But I loved what you said about like, yeah, that those like having the party, having the waffle party, having the melon bar, having the finger traps and the erasers, even though pencils aren't allowed, and we all know why. um,
Mm.
that but then once he finds out something about the outside world, like something definitive, he also does like to dabble, like you say, in like, I bet that my Audi is this. Like he likes to dream about who he might be, what his Audi might really be like. But then like once it's like, holy shit, like I have a kid, it's like he does
Mhm.
not dance during the dance party. He like, and then he finally like is connected to, his resistance.
Yeah, I guess for me, if Irv represents so we have this system, we have this Lumen system where people are devoid of culture and real meaning. There's no meaning, there's no real meaning. And again, I think this parallels our sort of 21st century postmodern late capitalist world where we are in a sense devoid of meaning, maybe not to the same degree, but there's parallels there. And so if how do humans deal with that? How do humans deal with that? So if Irv deals with it by finding meaning in religion in a sort of obviously adulterated, I'll say, religion.
Mm-hmm.
That's his way of dealing with it, just like some people do that in our world.
Mm-hmm.
And Dylan's way of dealing with it is buying into the sort of capitalist, climb the ladder, get the
Mm-hmm.
perks,
Mm-hmm.
um, achievements sort of thing. Like, okay, I just want the nice house and the nice car and the new TV kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what the finger traps for me represent.
Yeah.
And so it's very obvious in the show how vacuous all that is, how empty that is. Like finger traps, are you serious? But for me, it's like it's the same on our world. Like,
Right.
really? Is it really like a TV? Is that really what's going to give us happiness and meaning in life? Is it really a new car with gadgets? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they sound a little more attractive, but it's not going to give us meaning. It's not going to give
Mm-mm.
us a really fulfilled life with wholeness, an ability to feel whole. And then the what I found to be just ingenious kind of symbolism is that like he's talking about the waffle party the whole season. And then
Yes.
finally we get to the waffle party and we realize it's a waffle party all by himself.
Right.
Like the prize for winning at capitalism is isolation. Like
Right.
you get a waffle and syrup, you get something that's kind of nice compared to the food they eat down there, the token food or whatever.
And then like
That's
a
okay,
really
it's kind of
kinky
nice.
sexual experience, which is
Well,
also
well,
just really
well, yeah. I was gonna get to that, yeah. But like he's eating the waffle all by
uh-huh.
himself. Like
Yes, yes.
like the isolation of that is the reward, right? We live in these big houses.
So we
The
can
more
be
money you
alone.
make, the bigger your house can be.
So then you
Can
won't need anybody.
Yeah, and yep, you
Yeah.
don't need anybody. You don't need to rely on anyone. The
Mm-hmm.
nearest neighbor lives, 50 yards away, whatever, or more. Um, so yeah, I just thought that was a really nice parallel to our culture. And then yeah, I mean the dance thing, I don't know. There's a lot there. But I thought he was wearing the mask of an Egan, and so
Yes,
it's like,
definitely.
okay, yeah. So like I get
Mm-hmm.
to envision being at the very top of the ladder for a few minutes. It's
Yeah.
like I get to think of myself at the very top. So it's like this hierarchical kind of thing, and then I get to and like I don't know. Obviously, there's erotic and sexual
And all the dancers were wearing, one of them I think was wearing like a goat mask. Like they were all wearing different masks in their
Right,
like little
yeah.
dances.
Goat was there, wasn't it?
I mean, and what I love about that too is that, well, okay, yeah, the finger traps, and then ultimately, like you said, like the symbolism of the last of his last
Mhm.
reward
Yeah.
for being, and it's beautiful. So can you say it?
Oh, oh, you mean what he asked for himself?
Yeah.
Yeah, the gift. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So then the symbolism of we see this gift that he asked for, and they're kind of like, "Are you sure?" I think at one point they're like, "You
Yes.
sure you want this?" And then eventually it's revealed, and it's a glass cube, similar to the one Mark S has had on his desk all along. But Mark S's is a glass cube of himself, and this glass cube is all four of them together. And yeah, I think it symbolizes like the collective resistance that's necessary to tear down these systems of power and domination. You know, they're realizing now that they've all been radicalized, that the only way that they have each other, there's like a
Yep.
bigger bond with each other, and that they're going to work together to tear it down and work towards their liberation. Helly couldn't do it on her own, right? She tried on her own, failed.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take all of them, as well as probably in season two, working with these other departments, right? That's we're starting to see.
Presumably. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. But there's at least been innuendos there, right?
Yeah.
Of like, oh, maybe we should talk to each other and figure out what we're trying to do here. So
Yeah.
hopefully, the divide and conquer that Lumen management tries is being eroded or torn down, I should say,
Yeah.
by collective resistance.
What else I really love about that waffle party, is that because yeah, like we know that he loves the waffle party. Okay, I don't know if you've ever seen. I do not recommend it, but Ice Age, the one,
Yeah,
the movie. I mean, I don't know. Your kid is
I don't
still
think I've
very
seen it.
young. Okay, again, don't recommend it. Two of the characters are just really shitty to a different guy, and it's like just like this like toxic patriarchy, like teasing that's just like really cruel in my mind. And I'm like, I don't want
Yeah.
my kids. But the one thing about Ice Age, the one thing about Ice Age that I like is just this narrative of Scrat, who is this squirrel. And all we ever see of him in all the movies is he's obsessed with acorns. He loves acorns. He's always about the acorn. And then it's all this like comedy of like that, it's that like Coyote and the Roadrunner like type comedy. He like can never
Okay.
he's it's this like absolute yearning for this thing. And then
Uh-huh.
finally in like the third or fourth movie, like he like meets another squirrel and there's like romantic feelings and then like he doesn't care about the acorn anymore. And I was like, man, if there was ever a fucking like that is what love can feel like. Like Ice Age did a good job setting up that like this thing that he wants. And I'm just like, it's like Dylan is Scrat and that waffle party is this acorn
Mm,
that like in all it's like he wants that acorn so bad. Like one thing and yet he fucking gives it up for the
mm,
sake of what? For the sake of who? Oh, that is like
mm.
so fucking beautiful. I because
Yeah.
yeah, like the symbol of it, and then yeah, and then he still has to fucking do it by himself. He has to be in two places at once, like
Mm.
stretching out to hold the
Right.
levers so that he can do the thing. But he still like he brings it there. He's still like calling them in. Like it's this like and I think of like yeah like this like yeah competent protector like what we might do when we like pray or what like I'm going to call in my ancestors. I'm going to call in these like and it's like okay like I will feel the essence of them. I'm bringing this cube. They will be with me and I will be like stretching out. And it's like if I ever forget, I'll just like look at that picture and remember why. Oh, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
beautiful.
it is a beautiful scene. That whole episode is just amazing.
So it's like oh it was an amazing finale. I was like intrigued by the show and then like that episode and then it wasn't and then like that episode happened and then I was like well I think I'm gonna do a season on this one.
Nice.
So but we I see we're about at time, so I just want to say thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming.
What a fun conversation.
Oh my
Got thoughts
God.
percolating all over again.
I know.
And
Well, yeah, what I find too with these conversations is like they do percolate. Like I will continue to be thinking like I it's not over because we're ending the call, like it's like it still matters to me. We'll still be in community. We're putting it out there and um maybe other people will join the conversation. But it feels it feels really cool to just, yeah, if nothing else, just like have like a little intentional conversation to just like dive deeper into this. Um,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
do you have like anything that you would like me to promote for you? Like, um, work in the world?
I do somatic coaching, and people can find me at buriedwisdom.com.
Okay. I will
So if
definitely
folks are
link that.
interested in, you know, yeah, somatic coaching, dream work, anything in that line, they can find out more at buriedwisdom.com.
And those are like one-on-one sessions, or I know you have done like kind of group facilitations or like
Yes, I don't have any,
courses.
right. I don't have any groups planned right now, but
Okay.
I will
Like you
soon.
just
I am teaching a class. If anybody is in the Cincinnati area, excuse me. If anyone's in the Cincinnati area, I'm teaching a class where we're going to be, or facilitating a class where we're going to be reading Prentice Hemphill's "What It Takes to Heal," which is an amazing book.
ah
So it's kind of like a book study, but that's an in-person thing. So, but
and
that's at the
like
Hive. If anybody's
mhm,
interested in similar classes, some of them do end up being online. That's the Hive Cincinnati. You can find it by Googling it.
right. Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
they're just a great community organization that does um, really
Yeah, I know
good.
you've like shared the Hive stuff with us even. I know
Yes.
there was like I had a conflict, but I was wanting to sign up for one of your dream sessions, and those dream sessions were through the
Yeah,
Hive, right? Okay.
that's right. That's
All
right.
right. Well,
Hmm.
I can put those links up. Oh my gosh, and I like what a Prentice. Speaking of like Black women being like Prentice Hempill, that's a great book, like great person to
Mm,
follow. Um,
absolutely.
I think like I just want to say like I think you know I just appreciate that you are that you're like promoting the work of of Black leaders in the liberatory movement.
Mm,
Like I think that's
mm,
I know that's like a big reason why I feel like I can trust you to come on and talk about this kind of thing because it is a lens that is really important to me. So thank
mm.
you for doing that. I'm excited to hear how that all goes. And yeah, we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kristen. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, and we'll be in touch. And season 2 coming out soon.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm excited. All right. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I have posted any and all links to books and offerings from teachers that John and I mentioned in today's episode. Specifically, he mentioned Resmaa Menakem, who wrote the book My Grandmother's Hands, which I will link. I mentioned some hypnotherapy, and if you're curious to learn more about that, I highly recommend, of all things, the Numinous Network with Carmen Spaniola. She has some really great hypnotherapy tracks, one especially about gut-directed hypnotherapy, which I've been listening to, and it's amazing. Lots of hypnosis and trance journeys available there, as well as all of her work on secure attachment and contact nutrition. And of course, Rev Angel Kyoto Williams, as always. So check out the show notes. And as always, I invite you as my listener, whether we know each other in the real world or not, and it's like bonkers to me to think that there would be people finding my podcast that I do not actually know on a personal level. Oh my gosh, if you are one of them, I'm so flattered. Thank you for listening. But regardless of who you are and what your relationship to me might be, as always, I invite you to reach out to me at stonerstorywitch@gmail.com to let me know what resonates with you, what comments you have, what connections you're making, what dreams do you have for season 2? What is your contribution to the dream of collective liberation for this group of innies and outies in this world of Lumon and in this show of Severance? So I would love to hear from you. I want to thank Matt Shuby for the podcast art, my husband Kevin Carlo for all his help in the creation of the theme song for the podcast, and Aeneas Mitchell and John Williams for their inspiration of Hedwig's theme and Hadestown. And before I sign off, I would like to leave you with a quote from another one of my teachers, Rev Angel Kyoto Williams, who says, "Love and justice are not two. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. And without collective change, no change matters.